What is up, guys? I'm back with Lewis Gardner, another podcaster in the area. We have decided to dive right into the topic of homelessness. It is a very serious topic in, honestly, all along the West Coast that we want to dive right into. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the other side. Yeah, so basically, I was doing a lot of research on the homelessness that is going on in the San Luis Obispo area and kind of a few of the areas around it, and I was even able to dive into homelessness in California and see how it expands and how it works in between the counties.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want to give a little summary on what yours is about?
Yeah, so mine was more of a focus on my hometown, Seattle, and the effect that a lot of businesses have around there and how they're working to backtrack a lot of the harm that they've caused on the homeless community. But nonetheless, we thought it would be a great idea to do a podcast together regarding this problem. So, Dan, tell me, how long has this been a problem in San Luis Obispo?
Well, actually, it's been a problem for a pretty solid amount of time. In 2008, San Luis Obispo tried to get into a 10-year program to end homelessness. And that actually concluded recently in 2018. And while a lot of progress was done within the first amount of around 6 years, the progress that they made actually came back and homelessness regrew in the area by a solid amount. So I have to say around 12 years it's been a solid problem that San Luis Obispo is trying to get over. And I think that you told me that the problem with the Amazon taking care of homelessness in Seattle has gone a pretty long time.
Oh, yeah. So the problem in Seattle for homelessness, as much of the West Coast has experienced, only started recently. Though we've had homelessness in the past, it hasn't become a state emergency, which was declared by Governor Inslee of my state, Washington, until 2015.
It was declared a crisis until 2015?
Yes, it was. And so the state and the city have been working hand in hand regarding this project. And in fact, in 2015...
Bezos?
No, Bezos is the... Yeah.
Okay.
The Governor Jay Inslee
Okay.
proposed this as being a major problem. However, Bezos actually didn't even acknowledge the problem until much later. Not until around 2018.
2018?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of back and forth regarding who's to blame, but it can be said that now both the city and the businesses have been working to stem this problem because San Francisco, I know, has this. LA and Seattle all are big homes for the homeless, and it's really sad to see because Seattle, only despite being only the 14th largest city in the U.S., has the third largest population of homeless.
Really?
Yeah, it's really crazy.
I actually had no idea that it was that high. Do you know what the first and second are?
Yes, LA and New York. New York's always had this problem, but LA also has only recently run into this situation. And LA has a population of about 5 times the size of Seattle, yet they are not trailed that far behind by Seattle.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big problem.
How long has Seattle had like a pretty growing? Is the growth rate pretty large for homelessness in Seattle right now, or has it been able to smooth it out or plateau?
Going back to 1995, when Amazon and a lot of big businesses, tech businesses in particular, started moving in or being formed there, you could start to see a trend of higher home prices. In the course of 30 years, the price of a home in Seattle grew 130%. So the original
130%.
Yeah, think about the price of a regular home there back in 1990. It was like 100% of the value there, but nowadays it's around 230% of the original value. Yeah, so obviously a lot of cities have been seeing this growth, but nothing compared to Seattle, and it's really problematic because tech businesses moving into these areas create a large influx of wealth, and the housing communities start to increase the mortgages and prices that you have to pay for living in certain communities, and this eventually just kicks out locals who can't afford to live in these areas, and it just becomes a cycle of problems regarding wealth and the well-being of locals, as opposed to new people working for big businesses like Amazon, Microsoft, that are stationed in Seattle.
Yeah.
But for San Luis,
Yeah. So I actually wrote my paper about how housing is a big problem for solving homelessness, but that's not the only problem to attack. So do you think housing has most, if not all, of the like base problem for the homelessness, like of why people started becoming homeless?
I would
Or
say
what are like the most like the areas coming from that of why people became homeless?
I would have to say that for Seattle, our biggest problem would be the housing crisis that creates the homelessness crisis, because people aren't able to afford to live in the same neighborhoods that they've lived in all their lives, and they eventually get kicked out. They don't have anywhere to go, and a lot of homeless tend to stick in the same neighborhoods that they were kicked out of, which were usually typically lower income or already poor. And so when they're kicked out, they stay in those same communities, and that's typically where a lot of businesses seem to be buying old buildings and reconstructing. Amazon in particular has most of its campuses in South Lake Union. Once a poor neighborhood that they have revitalized. I've seen this in a lot of cities, where revitalization of older neighborhoods tends to happen. Would you say that's the case for San Luis?
I actually don't think so. San Luis Obispo is trying to just expand with their housing. It's not really doing a lot of the updating, and they're just trying to look for building new houses while people, like exactly what's going on with you, people can't afford it. But for the reason is actually kind of flipped in what San Luis Obispo is going through right now, because housing is going up in pricing, kind of what you were saying, but people are becoming homeless for a variety of different reasons, including drug or alcohol addiction, or loss of job, and it was 20% were loss of drug or alcohol. I believe 30% said they had lost their job, 20% it was because of issues with alcohol or drugs, and 17% had been evicted from former residents. And I was wondering if you thought that maybe the problem that was occurring in Seattle is because of drug or alcohol issues were so big in that area or not.
I would also have to say that contributes, not necessarily part of my research, but knowing my community, Snohomish County, my county, has the highest opioid addiction
Wow.
ODs per the entire U.S. So obviously I think that contributes, because King County, which is where Seattle is just south of me, and that is where there is also a high amount of drug use and overdosing. So I think it works both ways.
Yeah,
losing a home,
definitely.
getting addicted.
And it does work both ways. I
Yeah.
don't think it's just housing. I think there's a variety of different factors that go in to play, which is why like different solutions have to be used.
Implemented.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's where a lot of the city has found a problem. In 2009, the city commission decided to create a new task force that would work towards creating ideas and implementing them to fight homelessness, and in particular that was housing, and to a much smaller extent that was rehabilitation. And
Both of those ideas were put into play.
both of
Is
them
what
were,
the task force came up with.
they tried to, and they were taking taxpayer money, which a lot of people did not like. And
Really?
so in 2017, November 2017, they proposed a head tax on companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Starbucks. All the big businesses that were making over $20 million a year were going to be taxed $500 per employee. And a lot of people were not happy about that. In particular, Amazon, which I'm going to throw out a surprising statistic. Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos in the year of 2017 was making so much money that the $20 million that you would have to fit into to be taxed, he was making in approximately 2 hours every day for every weekend, the 24/7 and 365 days a year. The man was making more than any other person in the world at that time. And it just goes to show that his resistance to this tax was very, very bad for the company because of the image that he was just money hungry and power hungry. And
Wow, yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
it's really scary stuff because big businesses seem to have a grasp on our city right now. Would you say that
I don't think
business?
that's I don't think that's exactly what is going on in San Luis Obispo. I think it's more of different contributions to just like the current state of the economy
Yeah.
in the area, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and just a lot of different, just like a lot of different places that people are coming from. But a lot of what the money is going into right now is housing, but also now putting different centers of rehabilitation. And I was just wondering, if, just a quick question, if you had a lot of veterans within the Seattle area that were homeless or not.
Knowing this, knowing the area, my neighbor was a veteran in the Vietnam War. I know a lot of people in my community were veterans at some point in their lives. So yes, I think Seattle has a very large proportion of veterans, and especially on the streets, which is really sad to see.
It is, and San Luis Obispo has 144 individuals out of the current homeless in San Luis Obispo is just 1,483, which is a pretty solid size for the size of the county that is for the size of the county in general.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, with those 144 veterans, the amount has dropped over these last 4 years and has dropped at least around 63% with all the new coordinated systems and different helping centers that they have for them. And it's crazy to see all that work and all that money going in and actually seeing a payoff that um, just like going into different ideas other than housing is a really good idea. And I was just thinking about how that task force was implemented in the
Yeah.
Seattle area and was able to come up with different solutions.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of cities are starting to realize that rehabilitation is not the. It's been it's less viewed as being a priority because a lot of times people view drug users as being permanently
Yeah,
damaging.
chronically homeless.
Yeah, chronically homeless, and so it's sad to see. But now that cities like San Luis, as I just learned, are implementing more rehabilitation in Seattle. Amazon has started legal help for the homeless so they can get
That's
off the
great.
street because a lot of times they also have criminal backgrounds.
Yeah, definitely.
Even for offenses that they earned while on the street because they were unable to get jobs, they have to resort to stealing or
Exactly.
a lot of times mugging is big because the large amount of wealthy individuals walking on the street and the homeless.
Oh,
You
yeah.
have it's almost a social hierarchy that has influenced how Seattle runs on the streets, and it's really sad because you see very wealthy people. I mean, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, two richest men in the world live in the Seattle area, yet we have the third largest population of homeless, and you start to realize 1% of Jeff Bezos's entire income could go towards the homeless and solve so
That
many
is
problems.
crazy.
So I think in Seattle,
Has
in
he
particular-
contributed any of his income personally to how much has he contributed?
For Amazon, I know they contributed he had a new building constructed in the center of Seattle that houses 275 individuals per night. He provides legal housing there. They provide food for a much larger portion of the city.
So the money that Jeff Bezos is contributing is making a significant change in the.
It's yet to go into implication, but they recently donated this building to Mary's Place, which is a long-lasting Seattle organization, and this organization has, for a long time, since 2007, been bringing in homeless families that can live there, eat there, and eventually even find jobs within the organization or elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very good organization.
I think
for the city.
finding jobs is actually one of the biggest priorities.
Yes, exactly.
And like first like it's one of like the first steps in like still being able to reduce homelessness by like a significant amount.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, with like what you were talking about the housing issue, you were saying how people can't afford the housing,
Yeah.
and because they just they can't obtain the jobs that. Is it because they can't obtain the jobs that require
Yeah, a lot of times
like the big
it's
paying jobs in the big businesses? Is what
yeah.
you're saying?
Seattle has definitely involved itself in more tech-based industries, and
Which
so
requires a lot more
an education
experience,
experience. It requires a lot. I know one local business in particular, Pagliacci's Pizza, which is a very sorry, not Pagliacci's, Mod Pizza in Seattle, which is very popular. They only employ the former homeless, to work at the facilities. So each restaurant has approximately 10 workers, from what I can see, and they only employ local homeless. They provide them with very, very high income, based on the minimum wage that's typically given. The health benefits are very good. I don't know enough about it to be spewing on about it,
about the health benefits,
but I do know
that's why.
that it is very good because it has caused a great impact on at least my town's homeless population.
Is it a great deal of shelters in the area,
Yes, but
or not? Or is it a very small supply?
So
Because because if it is a small, because San Luis Obispo only has around, I believe it was 150 beds
mm-hmm.
available.
Wow.
150 beds available for the 1,400 homeless, and I was just and is it the same for the area in Seattle?
Yeah, so the task force that was made, one of the first things that they did was create housing. Seattle, very rainy, can be very cold in the winter.
Yeah, I was gonna ask how the environment affected.
It is very bad for their health. That's why they start to get into much harder drugs and start to resort to living underneath highway overpasses. You can visibly see it in the outskirts of the city because they keep getting pushed out by the city, to find new areas, and it's really sad. But one of the first things that they did was create housing facilities in South Seattle near the stadiums, like football stadium and baseball stadium. And though they were helpful at first, they were not in good areas, considering it was areas of lower income. So they felt they were being pushed back into the areas where more homeless would come out, because a lot of people in that area would be kicked out, and that's where.
Is the city working more towards being able to help the homeless, or trying more to push them out? Because I know a few cities down south, like LA, are half working to help the homeless, but a lot more of their program is also trying to push them out to different counties.
Yeah, it seems that they're trying to push them out a lot. From what I've seen, when you are on the highway, you see them reaching further and further from the epicenter of the city, because the city just does not want them inside. There's a lot of police brutality. There was a new documentary that came out. I can't put my finger on the name of it. I'll leave it in the description, but it was very eye-opening to see the problems that regarded how the homeless were treated. And I would have to say, a lot of cities, they initially were just trying to push them out, see if that would do the trick, and it does not. It does not.
I think having a little amount of shelters would contribute an insane amount to pushing the homeless out, and having them feel like they're being pushed out, I feel like would cause a lot of conflict or a lot of controversy in how people feel about the homeless.
Yeah.
And I think just building more shelters would cause a big amount of change, considering that at least in San Luis Obispo, only 10% of the homeless population in the small county can find a bed year round.
Yeah, it's really sad. Obviously, Pike's Place Market, very touristy for Seattle. Initially, when I was going back there when I was younger, there would be so many tents set up outside near a park nearby, and uh, and it was problematic because it was a very touristy part. Um, and so you would get a lot of backlash from like, oh, the city wasn't doing enough to stem this problem, and so to make it look like they were doing something, they would just push them out.
Push them out. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, well, I think we've definitely learned a lot about each other's research.
Yeah, definitely.
But thank you.